Hey, Christy, what do we talk about on our podcast?
Well, Ashley, we talk about all kinds of weird stuff.
Like aliens.
And ghosts.
And cults.
And cryptids.
And witches.
And murders.
Yeah, even sometimes murders. Basically, we talk about all kinds of weird shit.
Oh, I already said that.
Oh.
So yeah, if you like weird topics, feminist rants, and the occasional F-bomb, you should listen to us.
We post new episodes every other Monday.
Find us online at that'sweird.org.
And subscribe to That's Weird on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to No Better Death, the podcast that knows while you can die no better death than your own, that doesn't mean we can't take a look for the unusual and noteworthy in the deaths of others. Each episode, we'll take an in-depth look at some out-of-the-ordinary deaths and the events surrounding them. This show will contain graphic language and explicit details. I am your host, Sick Grayson. This is no better death. This is no better death. Getting sued by Peter Murphy. This is no better death. What's up, everybody out there in podcast land? It is I, Sick Grayson, coming back for last week's episode, finally this week. I do apologize for the delay. I had plumbers in and out of my house all week in the kitchen, so there wasn't ever really a good time to record. And you'll never know the difference, but I already recorded half of this episode and then my laptop crashed. So here I am starting this whole thing over again. I'm doing good. The family's back from Kansas. Thanksgiving is done. I survived Black Friday. Only grabbed a couple things for the kids. Nothing so big that anybody needed to pepper spray or shoot me over it. How'd you guys do? Did you make it out alive? Did you try not to die like I tell you to do every week? I had a decent 4-day weekend in there where I just sat on my ass. You know, there's nothing I love to do more than not go to work. It's this massive fuck you to all plans in life. Want to take a vacation and see the world? Fuck you, you gotta go to work. Want to sleep in? Fuck you, you gotta be there at 7. Want to go to your kid's recital at school? Fuck you, it's in the middle of the workday. Want to record your podcast sometime that isn't first thing in the morning or right before bed? Oh well, the whole chunk of day known as work is right there in the way. So I take every opportunity I can get just to sit on my ass. I binged the first 2 seasons of Hemlock Grove, and not bad. Not really sure where it's going at this point. I guess about a season and a half. I'm at the spot where Peter just found out about the baby Roman's been hiding in what should be a recording studio with all that sound foam in there. Don't tell me what happens. I'll finish it off probably the 4-day weekend I'm taking for Crimbus, Yule, Saturnalia, whatever you want to call it. I'm taking that weekend before Christmas, doing a 4-day weekend there. And so that's coming up, whatever you celebrate. If it hasn't been made clear on the show yet, I personally am an atheist. I do go along with the holiday celebrations, and I don't bash anyone else's religion. I just do my own thing. So whatever holiday, upcoming events you've got going on, have fun, be safe. I'm pretty stoked about it. We already got the presents piling up under the tree. I want to know what's in those boxes. So this week's theme, no theme. Also don't really have any headlines. I haven't kept up with much lately just because I've been busy. I did see that Amber Geiger, the lady we talked about a few episodes ago, that the cop in Texas that shot the guy in his apartment, she is being indicted on murder charges. So it'll be really cool to see how that plays out. You know, more often than not, it seems the cops get away with this shit. They might actually get this one in trouble. So we'll see how that plays out. No theme this week. You know, I never really intended to have themed episodes when I started the show. With episode 1, I just Googled unusual deaths and accidents, and I found out about the London beer flood. And at the bottom of that article was a link to the Boston Molasses disaster, which was a similar accident. So I was like, okay, cool, that's my 2 stories for the show. Then the next episode, kind of the same thing happened. I stumbled across the Bhopal gas leak and then found a related article about Lake Nyos. And from that point, themed episodes just kind of became a thing. But over the last 11 episodes, I would stumble across these random articles that I wanted to discuss on the show but never really fit. And since I'm lazy and this week didn't have a topic or a theme ready to go, I just figured this would be as good a time as any to just sort of mishmash all this random stuff together, sort of how last podcast on the left does side stories when they don't have a main story to cover. So this is sort of my side stories. 6 murder mix. We're at about month 3 in the show, and this seems like a good time to squeeze it in. What's in store today? I've got a GQ article that asks 12 mass shooters if anything could have stopped them, Amazon reviews left by a serial killer, a school that teaches you to identify the dead, and last words of famous people. And this would be the perfect format for listener stories. I say it every episode, and I'll say it again here. If the audience, you guys out there, have personal experiences with death, thoughts on death in general, a story I haven't covered that you think the rest of the audience should know about, please email me at nobetterdeath@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook or Twitter. Let me know what you got. I'll put it on the show, I'll tell your story, read your letter, report on whatever you want to hear. Just drop me a line and I'll give you content. So first up in the Sick Murder Mix number 1, we have a article from this September, GQ UK, that asks 12 mass murderers if anything could have stopped them. I forgot to note the author's name, but you can look it up in the show notes. Show notes are now available at nobetterdeath.info. Just click the arrow to the left of the page where you can select how to navigate the website and just go to show notes. You can see all my links and everything like that. So the author's name is there somewhere. He's a British reporter staying in America, and he had been talking to a shooter in America who didn't actually shoot anybody. This guy just shot a bullet into the school he went to through a window. It didn't hurt anybody. He went to jail, got out, and now lives a life in the Pacific Northwest somewhere like a normal person. So the author was already looking into sort of doing something about mass shooters, but then got the idea of, oh, hey, what if I went to a database of mass shooters and just wrote to them all and found out what could have stopped them. So that's where we come into the article with this guy. He had sent out 50 letters to mass shooters and 12 of them responded. America has the same conversation after each mass shooting, the inevitable debate about gun control versus mental health. It becomes factionalized, politicized, and nothing changes. Then the next mass shooting happens. But the one person we never speak to about mass shootings is the shooter himself, and it is almost always a him. Perhaps because too often they kill themselves or are killed by police, but if we could, we might ask them this: what would have stopped you doing what you did? You tell us. Would it have been some kind of counseling? Would it have been legislation that could have stopped you from getting a hold of the weapon that caused so much destruction? And what was it that drove you over the edge? In 2012, researchers at Stanford University began compiling a database of every mass shooting in America since 1966, creating a single repository for as many reports of mass shooting events as could be collected online. Cross-checking where possible with individual prison rosters, the author of the article here found that there were 50 mass shooters still in prison across the U.S. and sent letters to each of them asking what could have stopped them. 12 responded. A large chunk of the article is then, like I said, about this kid who didn't actually shoot anybody. I'm going to skip that piece, but if you're interested in that part, you can just follow the show notes to the full article. But the first response to the letters sent out was from Silvio Escudero Leyva. In December 1999, Leyva, a 36-year-old Cuban immigrant who worked as a housekeeper at the Radisson Bay Harbor Inn in Tampa, Florida, burst into the hotel, which was crowded with football fans, and gunned down 4 co-workers and shot a 5th person as he was trying to escape. Leyva was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He wrote saying he wouldn't do a face-to-face interview, but in his letter sent from the Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, he did say that looking back, he thought his co-workers could have prevented the attack from happening, that if his behavior in the workplace had been reported, it may not have happened. If guns weren't available to people with mental health problems, Leyva said, Mass shootings would be reduced to isolated cases at worst, since knives would be stoppable and homemade bombs need materials and work which can be detected before they reach their goal. Another letter was from Robert Stewart, who in 2009, aged 45, opened fire at a North Carolina nursing home, killing 8 people, and as a result, he was sentenced to life in prison. He said he didn't remember the incident as he was on prescription medication at the time, but that all the firearms he possessed were bought legally. There's a serious mental health issue here in the United States, he said. The government keeps dancing around the issue. Their solution is to put mental health patients in regular prison. A few weeks later, he sent a second letter stating that he stood behind the Second Amendment. That's the only way people can keep the government from becoming tyrants. One letter from Eric Houston, who in 1992, age 20, killed his former teacher and 3 students with a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun and a sawn-off rifle. It became known as the Lyndhurst High School shooting, and a California jury sentenced Houston to death. In his letter, he said mass shootings happen because of underlying reasons, such as depression, anger, isolation, money, and family problems. He added, "I've tried to keep my eye on mass shootings, from Columbine to the Las Vegas shooting. Animosity, hopelessness, and lack of compassion will always be an issue." Houston said he hoped guns would one day be outlawed to the general public and that only tasers and pepper spray would be available for home defense. "The only people who need guns are the military and state National Guard, I think." As for his own crime, he wrote that if counseling had been available, it may have helped, but he was dealing with his own demons, and they got the better of him. Some letters were short but still illuminating. Robert Smith, not the Robert Smith, carried out a mass shooting in Arizona in 1966, which was believed to be a copycat killing of what's often cited as the first school shooting in U.S. history, that took place earlier that same year at the University of Texas at Austin, when, after killing his mother and wife at their homes, Charles Whitman climbed a tower on the university campus and shot and killed 14 people, wounding 31 others, before being shot dead by police. Smith's copycat shooting in Arizona left 5 dead and 1 injured. On a blank postcard, Smith wrote, thanking the author for the letter and adding, "I strongly suspect your missive represents a mass mailing to mad dog killers across this country. I wish you good fortune with your enterprise, which sounds most worthwhile. However, I must respectfully decline to participate as my raving lunacy renders my opinions on any subject altogether worthless." And so the author of the article wrote back to see if he could change Smith's mind and get him to say something, and Smith wrote back this: "I can muster no enthusiasm whatsoever for chatting about crimes and criminals or the evil that lurks in the hearts of men. Regarding my own damnable atrocities, I can assure you such would be as distressful for me to relate as for you to hear, if not more so. My advice? Leave the Americans behind to merrily murder each other, for clearly such is the fate we were born for." Some letters contained nothing of substance. Others said they couldn't talk on instruction from their lawyers. Richard Farley, who in 1988 shot and killed 7 people in his workplace and is housed at California's San Quentin prison, wrote to say, "Years from now, after my appeals are over, I may be interested in giving my opinions on motivations, but not now." And you know that means something, whatever he's going to say is going to sound worse than it did in court, and his appeals aren't up yet. So he's not going to talk about anything until all his appeals are up and he knows for sure he's not getting out of prison. But I mean, dude, you killed 7 people. You're not getting out. Andrew Worst, who was 14 when he killed his science teacher and wounded 2 students at a middle school dance in Pennsylvania in 1998, wrote to say that he couldn't help with this story out of respect and consideration for his victims. Another, who asked to remain anonymous, wrote that one's will is the true weapon, but I believe that better mental health services are one of the most obvious and surest ways to have a meaningful impact. And see, that's what I'm always saying, mental health awareness. We need to be better at assisting those with mental problems, but before we can help them, we need to create an environment in which people feel comfortable talking about their mental issues. I grew up in a family that didn't talk about feelings or mental problems and would frequently make fun of me for displaying what few emotions or mental issues my Asperger ass was capable of emoting, you know. I had mental issues, I still have mental issues, and for all I know, all it could have taken to push me this way was one more punch in the face from my stepdad. But had a teacher or other family member, fellow student, or friend, anyone paid attention, maybe someone reported my parents for their rampant drug abuse, and who knows, taking my sister and I from our family, maybe we could have grown up to be fucking Frasier or something. And these guys, maybe all they needed was a teacher or coworker or even someone at church to say, hey, are you okay? What's going on? Let's see if we can fix this and steer them away from that other path. But being the self-centered assholes most Americans are, we can't really be bothered to help others, right? At least that's the way it seems. To us, helping someone else means receiving less ourselves, and we can't have that, can we? But anyway, back to the article. Jared Lohner, who killed 6 people and injured Representative Gabby Giffords in Tucson, Arizona in 2010, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, Jared Lohner. Well, anyway, he didn't respond, nor did James Holmes, the Aurora, Colorado cinema shooter, or Dylan Roof, the white supremacist who slaughtered 9 black people at a Charleston church in 2015. Fun fact, James Holmes and a bunch of other gnarly people, do you know where they keep them? Do you know where they keep the heavy hitters? Not necessarily the serial killers, but the mass shooters, the bombers, the terrorists, and gang leaders who can't be allowed to communicate with the outside world? Florence, Colorado. That's right here in Colorado, we've got James Holmes, Terry Nichols, Ted Kaczynski, the living Boston Marathon bomber brother, and a bunch of other people. We still have the dude from the '93 World Trade Center bombing here, all housed in Colorado. One mass shooter who replied, William Hardesty, wrote saying he was high on drugs and alcohol at the time he embarked on a rampage in California and Michigan in 1978, killing 7, and the only thing that might have stopped it would have been some sleep. Arming himself with a pump-action rifle, he shot his father in the back, then waited for his mother to arrive home and shot her in the head while she was washing dishes in the kitchen. He then buried his father's body under a pile of meat in a freezer that sat on his front porch. In the early hours of the following morning, he drove to a local bar, Abigail's Dirty Shame Saloon, and shot 2 men in the parking lot. A few hours later, he shot and killed his former brother-in-law and wounded another man. Police arrived at his parents' house and heard music coming from inside. When they pushed the front door open, they heard someone racking a gun. The state troopers took cover behind the trees and Hardesty stepped out onto the porch with a rifle. As he pointed it towards them, he was shot in the shoulder and stomach and was arrested. A dramatic black and white photograph following his arrest shows him covered in blood lying on a stretcher about to be carried into an ambulance, while journalists and TV film crews captured the scene. An elderly man who lived next door to the Hardesty family told one newspaper they'd seen Hardesty's father beating him in the backyard a year before the murders. His mother had to come out and hit him in the head with a brick to make him stop. So that sounds pretty functional, right? That's a little more extreme than my family, but not by much. During his trial, jurors heard Hardesty had embarked on a wild 2-day killing spree and that he'd killed because he was bloodthirsty. At one early hearing, he said he wanted his attorney to check up on the occult and asked to be released into the custody of evangelist Billy Graham. Hardesty's most recent mugshot shows an old man with gray hair looking solemnly into the camera lens. Since 1981, he's been known by his Michigan Department of Corrections number 163996. When asked what could have stopped him doing what he did, he said, "I was doing drugs and going through a divorce. I was having nightmares and they got so overwhelming I couldn't think." Hardesty said his father used to hit him on the head repeatedly with a tool from his shed. I'd get out of work, come over, and he'd grab my head. He used to call me Willie Lump Lump because I had so many lumps on my head. Oh my God, I can't figure out if that's funny or just wrong. But he's the one who put them there. It just snowballed. I couldn't handle it, and instead of trying to talk to him, if I did, he'd backhand me. I shot him. My mother, my brother-in-law, a guy who worked with him, and the others. When asked what he would have done had the weapon, his father's gun, not been there, Hardesty said he doubts anyone would have died. I would have gotten into a fight with him instead. My dad was a big man, a foot taller than me. But, why? Okay, even if your problem is like your dad's an abusive piece of shit and you're gonna kill him, whatever, why not just shoot him? If he was the problem, kill his ass and leave everyone else alone. With the history of violence, could have probably got a real short sentence or maybe a stay in a mental institution instead of being locked up for the rest of your life for killing half a dozen other people that didn't have anything to do with it. When asked about the Parkland shooting, he said, "I usually don't watch the news. My bunkie said somebody shot somebody at a school. What are people doing to them to make them that way? Kids can be cruel. How do you stop it?" Years ago, schools were run by religious people, and religion has gone out of schools. Let the church back into schools. Children don't have the proper guidance. The week before I shot those people, I was talking to Christian prayer lines, trying to get help. I put myself in a mental hospital 3 times. I knew I was having problems with my mind, but then I'd get all cleaned up and go drinking again. So this guy's solution to ending school shootings is to bring religion back into school. I guess he's been in prison for a while, so I'm not sure he's caught the news, but a lot of religious figures aren't exactly the pinnacle of morality that children should strive to be, so I don't necessarily think putting religion back in school is going to be the solution to stopping people from killing. When asked about guns, Hardesty said, "My family all hunted, but if my father's guns had been locked up, it could have been a different story. You can't get rid of guns, but put a lock on them at least. If you have guns in your house, they have to be locked up unless you're using them. That would stop a lot of people getting killed. You'd be surprised how many people don't take a drink of alcohol because the liquor cabinet's locked." Paul DeVoe received a death sentence in Texas for a mass shooting he carried out in 2007. Marble Falls is a town of about 7,000 people in the picturesque Texas Hill Country. It was a quiet Sunday evening in August when DeVoe, then 43, became enraged after his landlady demanded that he leave her home, and he embarked on a killing spree. Drunk and high on crystal meth, he had fallen asleep with a gun lying next to him, a weapon he borrowed, he claims, to protect against snakes. When he was woken and turfed out of the house, he said he was consumed by paranoia, grabbed the gun, and began shooting at random. And this all checks out as tweaker behavior, by the way. In case you haven't been around somebody who's on meth, this all sounds right up the alley. This is a typical tweaker date. DeVoe then ran outside to his trailer and got an extra clip and bullets, but when he returned, his landlady had gone. He jumped in a pickup truck and drove to O'Neill's Sports Tavern, a regular hangout in Marble Falls. DeVoe was dressed in motorcycle clothing consisting of a black leather vest, jacket, chaps, and a cap. It was almost 8 p.m. when he walked in and spotted an ex-girlfriend, Glenda Purcell. DeVoe had badly beaten Purcell 2 months earlier, and she had taken out a protective order against him. Inside the bar, DeVoe put his hand over Purcell's eyes, held a gun to her head, and pulled the trigger several times, but it didn't go off. As she ran to the back of the bar, one of the bartenders, Michael Allred, calmly asked DeVoe for the gun, but DeVoe shot him in the chest and ran. Allred died from his wounds. DeVoe then stopped at a gas station where he bought 2 12-packs of Heineken and started drinking. He claims that's the last thing he remembers. But here's what happened next. DeVoe then drove to the home of another ex-girlfriend, Paula Griffith, who lived in nearby Jonestown, a tiny town 40 minutes northwest of Austin. When he got there, he shot Griffith, her boyfriend, her 15-year-old daughter, and her daughter's 17-year-old friend. Police discovered the bodies after the 17-year-old's father became worried when his daughter didn't call. DeVoe then stole a white Saturn station wagon from Griffith's house and set off on a 1,700-mile drive to New York where his mother lived. On the way, he called her to confess that he'd just slaughtered 5 people. As shocking as that must have been to hear, what she didn't know at the moment was that there would be a 6th. The vehicle DeVoe was driving developed stalling problems and was riding rough. In Greencastle, Pennsylvania, he left Interstate 81 and spotted a car that he liked the look of. He stopped, entered a home, killed an elderly woman, and transferred to her Hyundai Elantra. He was eventually arrested at a friend's house on Long Island after a short standoff with police. It took a Texas jury just 20 minutes to convict him of the murders in 2009, sentencing him to death. At his trial, jurors were told DeVoe began drinking heavily when he was in his early teens and was prone to violent outbursts. He abused a string of women he dated in New York and over the years was in and out of jail. He'd been on death row for almost a decade when he agreed to do an interview for this article. DeVoe looked much paler than he did in his booking photo from a decade ago. He was unshaven, and what was left of his hair was shorn, and he gave a toothless grin due to the years of crystal meth and alcohol abuse. He said that when he called his mother after the murders, he also told her he'd been speaking to his dead grandmother, as if she was still alive. He said he'd been suffering from depression, he had been in and out of the hospital having treatment for a snake bite, and that on the night of the murders, he drunk a bottle of rum and smoked half an ounce of crystal meth. This dude should have been dead. DeVoe was a convicted felon before he embarked on his killing spree, and so by law, he shouldn't have been able to access a gun. But he said his work partner was out of town at a wedding, and he had a key to his house and knew where he kept the weapon. When asked what he would have done had he not been able to find the gun, he said, "If I hadn't had the gun, it wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have jumped in the truck that night and left." DeVoe said his childhood had been rough, that his father was an alcoholic and had beaten him for things his siblings did wrong. Sometimes he'd keep the young DeVoe back from school because of the bruises. "Even to this day, I get panic attacks. I'm on psychotic medication. If I hear two guys arguing in here, I start freaking out. I have a panic attack. I try to turn up my radio, put the headphones on to avoid it. But a lot of the times I can't. It's too late. My heart starts racing. I start sweating and I get shaky." When asked if psychotic medication could have changed the outcome 10 years ago, he said, "I believe so." And when asked to describe the feeling of what it was like to grab the gun and go out and kill 6 people, he said, "Oh God, fear, loneliness, yeah, depressed. It's hard to explain." "But you don't get those feelings anymore?" the author asked. And this guy said, "Yes, I do." So even with the medication, this guy just kind of sounds like, due to his upbringing and his mental wiring, he's just kind of designed to be spazzy and freaky and depressed and lash out at people, you know, and that's a hard one. How do you help someone in that position? How do you stop them from becoming violent when they have to live with that mindset all day, every day? In many ways, there are similarities between what happened to drive Paul DeVoe to the brink and what drove Luther Castile to kill 2 people and wound 16 others in a gun rampage in an Illinois bar in 2001. Castile was sentenced to death a year later, but when George Ryan ended his 4-year term as the state's governor in 2003, he granted clemency to all inmates on death row, claiming the system was unjust. Castile's sentence was commuted to life. The incident for which he'll eventually die in prison happened in the town of Elgin, northwest of Chicago. Castile, then 42, had been kicked out of a bar by 2 bouncers for harassing women, but before he drove home, he vowed revenge. He shaved his head into a mohawk, put on a combat jacket, and returned with a .357 Magnum in a shoulder holster, a 9mm pistol in a belt, and a sawed-off 12-gauge loaded with buckshot. Now 60, Castile still cuts an imposing figure and can show occasional flashes of a temper that he says is the reason he's in there. He said he suffered from depression all his life, but wanted to make it clear from the outset that he offers no excuse for what he did. "However, I do offer reason," he said. Castile claimed he went to a behavioral health clinic in the late 90s seeking help, but that the doctor became intimidated by him and ended up calling the police. There's no way to verify this, no records to check because no crime was committed. But Castile still sees this as a catalyst that saw him ultimately spiral out of control. "I have an extremely antisocial personality," he said. "It's deep within me, not superficial where it can be seen. And I have contempt for the police and society in general." Castile was stockpiling weapons and ammunition well before the incident in the bar and was preparing for something much bigger, he said. What exactly, he wouldn't say, but he would offer this: "I was arming up for an eventual death stand." He insisted that the night in question, though, was not premeditated. He didn't take any guns with him when he went to the bar initially, but said that when he was thrown out by bouncers he felt slighted, and that was the trigger. After he shot up the bar, he said he left there, quote, "as motherfucking Satan. If a cop would have stopped me, or Jesus, I'd have killed their goddamn ass dead." Born into a family of, as he puts it, chronic welfare recipients who were antisocial, anti-education, and didn't give a damn about us kids, Castile grew up with his 2 brothers on the streets of Chicago. His first arrest came at the age of 12, and he was in and out of juvenile institutions for most of his teenage years. There, associating with older criminals enabled him to learn the game. Even today, in Menard, he is incarcerated with men he has known since he was 13. He has read about other mass shootings over the years. One in particular, he said, made him particularly sad, when the then 21-year-old white supremacist Dylan Roof shot and killed 9 black worshipers at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, 2015. Somebody poisoned that kid to make him hate people like that, because it's not a natural thing to hate people because of their color, he said. And there's this boy who now sits on death row in a federal penitentiary somewhere, when in fact, they, his mother and father, should be on death row. For Castile, it's very much about nurture, not nature. Mass killers are not pre-wired. So what about Castile's own parents? Did he think they were culpable? They should have been hanged, he said. The prison authorities came to me in 2005 when I was in state penitentiary to tell me my dad had died. You may as well have told me it was raining outside because it made no difference to me whatsoever. Castile said his parents poisoned him and his 2 brothers. He was 13 years old when he first fired a gun. He'd steal to get money to eat and would sleep under porches, on rooftops, and in garages, and when he started finding guns in the houses he had robbed, he began using them to carry out armed robberies. So what about guns? Would he have committed the crimes for which he is now serving a life sentence if he hadn't been able to access them? I hear a lot about gun control, and it's truly laughable, he said. You will never rid the United States of America of guns. Guns are all over the street. Did I have to get a background check to get an 8-ball of cocaine? No, all I had to do was have a little money. There's so many guns in this country, it's just pathetic. It's asinine. Jonathan Metzl, a gun violence expert at Vanderbilt University, said it's a fantasy to think a single pill or a specific psychiatric treatment could stop somebody from committing a mass shooting, and mass shootings can't be solved by only addressing mental illness or guns. It's multifactorial, he said. In the U.S., we have nearly 40,000 gun deaths a year. It's astronomically higher than all other comparable countries. It's frustrating when people say there is no one law that would reduce gun deaths, so let's do nothing. You can have safe storage practices. You can have universal background checks and close the loopholes. It's not a mystery what we need to do to reduce gun deaths, but we are up against the headwind of a very powerful corporate gun lobby. Mass shootings are hard to predict, but one thing that could help is if we can identify somebody spiraling out of control, like most of the mass shooters that were spoken to in this article. The Gun Violence Restraining Order is a piece of legislation designed to address just that. People who are at risk can alert authorities if they feel their husband, father, or boyfriend is escalating, spiraling out of control, Metzl said, and they can take away their guns before they can do harm. I just want to point out here, women can be violent too. I can vouch for that shit. Kind of sexist there to assume it's always a dude. I mean, yes, statistics show it's typically dudes, it's mostly dudes, but women are involved here too. They do assault dudes, they do shoot people. Since Parkland, the number of states that give courts the power to intervene and disarm people showing warning signs of violence or in the throes of a crisis has doubled. In most states, a person must be convicted of a crime before they lose their right to a firearm, but so-called red flag gun bills are gaining in popularity. Before Valentine's Day this year, only Connecticut, California, Washington, Oregon, and Indiana had red flag laws. Now, Florida, Vermont, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland have joined them, with Illinois and Texas looking to follow. Perhaps in some small way, it's comforting to note that many of the mass shooters interviewed or corresponded with for this article indicated that there were warning signs before they embarked on their rampages, that their decision to kill didn't just happen in a vacuum. Perhaps, in addition to making it harder to get a hold of weapons, we need to get better at spotting the signs. Age may have tempered slightly the rage Luther Castile felt in 2001, but he said he still feels it now, after a decade and a half in prison, even though he can no longer drink alcohol and is able to take out some of that aggression on the weight bench. When asked what triggers it, he said anything. And when it happens, his adrenaline rockets. If you can imagine you're about to be attacked or about to attack, your adrenaline is so powerful it's got your hands and face shaking, he said. It leaves you drained if you don't do anything about it. The question is, how do we stop future Luther Castiles from acting on that rage? If they, or someone they know, can spot them, they can get help to temper it. Certain psychotic events can be treated with medication and/or therapy. Each state has a law allowing police to take someone to a mental health emergency room if necessary for evaluation. Then they're either sectioned or they're sent home. If it's the latter, what's the next step? According to one mental health expert, there rarely is one. But if there was a sponsor designated by the state to ensure that a person couldn't access weapons and continued to see a doctor on a regular basis, and that if they didn't and they were worried they could recommend to be detained, that seems like a good idea. But we lack this third party. The government needs to make that help available, which is why solutions to gun violence are bound up with the healthcare debate. Healthcare is expensive in America, but treatment for would-be killers needs to be free. Those without health insurance could qualify for government help through the Medicaid or Medicare programs, but sometimes red tape is enough to stop someone from getting help. With that help, though, perhaps people like the Parkland shooter would have never opted to use a weapon of war in a school building, and perhaps the Las Vegas shooter would have never fired more than 1,100 rounds from his room on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel into a crowd of concert goers. Red flag laws may enable authorities to remove weapons from those at risk, but at the moment it's too early to tell whether it's affecting murder rates. What we know is that they're primarily being enforced to prevent suicide. According to a study by the University of Indianapolis, in some years as much as 80% of all gun confiscations in Indiana have been because of concern over the risk of suicide rather than murder, and it's said to correlate with a 7.5% drop in people taking their own life with a gun. Weapon seizures are clearly having an impact, but guns are the elephant in the room. There needs to be a federal law that makes locking up weapons mandatory. If there had been such a law, Paul DeVoe may have never been able to access his friend's gun in Marble Falls. None of this will stop gun violence altogether in the U.S., but it would reduce it, possibly to a fraction of what it is at the moment. Right now, it's an epidemic. The good news is that momentum for change seems to be building, but only when real change comes will we all sleep a little easier. And that's pretty much the end of the article. Pretty interesting, yeah? Hearing it from the horse's mouth. And a lot of them seem to agree. I mean, if the people committing the shooting crimes are like, hey, if I couldn't have got this gun, and if someone would have been there to help me, this wouldn't have happened. When you have these shooters saying it, the government needs to listen. The gun industry needs to listen. The gun lobbyists need to listen. You know, gun rights don't necessarily need to be taken away from every citizen, but they do need to be taken away from people who may be a threat, and the laws do need to restrict how easy it is to access them as far as purchasing them and storing them. I mean, these people are telling you themselves. Better gun laws, mental health awareness. And now, I've got an oldie but a goodie, 5 fast facts about death. That's right, we haven't done this one in a while because we had Halloween themed stuff and Thanksgiving themed stuff, and we just haven't gotten around to doing 5 fast facts about death. But here we go, back to the classic. 1. Ancient Chinese alchemists experimented with different chemicals and substances to try to uncover the secret to eternal life. Their experiments evolved over time into what is now called traditional Chinese medicine. So Chinese medicine started from looking for the cure to mortality. Many people who practice Chinese medicine claim these practices help you live longer. Fun fact, it also led to the discovery of gunpowder, which has contributed to far more lives lost than the overall helpful impact Chinese medicine has given. 2. As dead bodies decay, they burp or release gases. For this reason, caskets and mausoleums need to be ventilated so the gas can escape. 3. The difference between a coffin and a casket is the shape. A coffin gets smaller toward the bottom where the legs go. Back in the day when everything was shipped in wooden crates, they needed some way to show, hey, there's a dead body in here. So the coffin narrowed at the end to signify this isn't regular cargo, this is a body. But now that we have tracking systems, logistics, barcodes, not a lot of chance a body's going to get mixed up with typical cargo, so we went back to the typical rectangular pad-filled casket. 4. Before William Shakespeare died, he ordered a sign be put on his grave that said he would curse anyone who tried to move his body, and so far, no one has ever moved it. 5. Some cultures, including the Yanomami tribe in the Amazon rainforest, practice the cannibalistic ritual of endocannibalism, which is eating deceased loved ones and is considered an honor. Next random topic in 6 murder mix, Todd Kohlhepp, serial killer currently serving life in South Carolina for the murder of 7 people, with more being investigated, at least another 2, and he's saying that there's even more than that. You know, and I don't usually do serial killers on the show, much like I don't usually do shooters on the show, but I guess that's why this is a murder mix instead of a themed. But anyway, yeah, I don't usually do serial killers, and I've only covered one so far, Vincent Groves, and that was because it was a Colorado-themed episode. I'm not going to talk about Todd Kohlhepp's murders or his case, but rather his online activity. That's the interesting part here. If you haven't heard this one, basically the gist is, Todd Kohlhepp left Amazon reviews for items he used during his years-long killing spree. So much so that many have named him the Amazon Reviews Killer. And in the pantheon of serial killers and their nicknames, that's got to be one of the worst, right? Like if all serial killers went to one prison, all the other killers would make fun of this guy's nickname. He'd be left in the far corner of the yard with no one to talk to except Richard Speck and his weird boobs. But this guy kind of has boobs too, so maybe they could just hang out together and bedazzle each other's man bras or something. Kohlhepp first came into public consciousness in late 2016 when a woman was found on his property trapped inside a storage container. Screen grabs soon surfaced of Kohlhepp's creepy reviews of items such as locks, shovels, and knives, and the news continued to come to light about other crimes he had committed and his strange personality. While the police were performing the Facebook and cell phone investigations, they also found that Todd had an Amazon account. The reason they managed to track it down was because he left reviews on several products. One was a knife, an SOG Pentagon fixed blade. He gave it 4 stars and the following review. Haven't stabbed anyone yet, yet, but I am keeping the dream alive, and when I do, it will be with a quality tool like this. Yeah, so that's not alarming. I mean, I get some people make jokes or are sarcastic, but, you know, if someone does it multiple times, like on this next item, a 5-star critique on an SOG entrenching tool, aka a shovel. Keep in the car for when you have to hide the bodies and you left the full-size shovel at home. Does not come with a midget, which would have been nice. Padlocks apparently were a purchase for Kohlhepp as well. Now my locks have locks. Places, Hotel California now. And I really wish I could have found screenshots of these reviews. I tried to find them on Amazon, but didn't feel like scrolling through tens of thousands of reviews to figure out which shovel or knife it was. And that's even if the reviews were still there. The cops could have had them taken down by now. I assume so. And even if they are still up, they're probably not under his real name. So this is a plea for any screenshots. If anyone has seen screenshots of this guy's Amazon user reviews, like the stuff he left for purchases, please let me know. I would love to take a look at them. But just going off that little bit of information from the articles I could find, really weird. I mean, isn't that like somewhere in the top 10 rules of being a serial killer? Don't talk about the gear you have, the things you've bought. Don't leave reviews saying, well, I haven't stabbed anybody with it yet, but I'm sure it'll be great when I do. This guy wanted to be caught. You know, people can ignore 1 or 2 weird things, but after so many, it's kind of a trigger. But then, or kind of a warning flag, but then that's kind of the weird thing. Nobody even caught this. It's not like his reviews triggered the police to investigate. They just happened to be walking his property looking for missing women, found one, and then found his reviews. Again, mental health awareness, man. If someone had flagged this guy's reviews, maybe he could have been investigated before he killed how many more people than he had already killed up to that point. What's next? I would save this article. I thought it was a story, but it turned out to be fake, which I guess maybe makes it even a little more interesting. I wish it was real. You know, if you want a serial killer to be real in this world, you would want him to be one taking out child molesters, right? Many social media users encountered a September 2018 news article reporting that law enforcement agencies in a Michigan county were on the lookout for a vigilante serial killer after 3 pedophiles were murdered in the span of 1 week. A version of the same article, published on the NBC 9 News website, which has no affiliation with the real NBC News, stated that the murders had occurred in Longview, Texas, while a near verbatim copy published on another website, falsely posing as CBS News Outlet 15, asserted the killer was on the loose in Macomb County, Michigan. Each site had a similar story, but an entire country apart. Law enforcement officials in Longview, Texas have held a press conference to announce they believe a vigilante targeting pedophiles is on the loose, with reports that 3 local offenders have been found dead over the past week. Authorities are appealing for any information regarding the murders, which have claimed the lives of 3 men on the Texas Sex Offender Registry for crimes involving offenses against children. In this article even went so far as to put fake quotes in, saying, "We urge whoever is committing these murders to stop immediately and turn themselves in," said one officer. "While we understand the community's attitude to pedophiles, there is no way in a civilized society that we can accept this sort of vigilantism." And the reason for the discrepancy over location, of course, was that this was just another bit of junk news. A common tactic among purveyors of junk news is to focus their fictions on specific geographic locations. A disreputable website can set the same fake news story in a variety of locations in order to spread misinformation broadly outwards from smaller communities with minimal effort. In 2016, we saw a rash of this type of story claiming that, insert a celebrity name, was moving to so-and-so, or had things to say about blah, 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 blah. It was a fake news story. It's just clickbait to try to sling ad space or get you to open spam or whatever the deal is. So unfortunately, the story about someone going around killing pedophiles was not real. Police departments in both Macomb County, Michigan and Longview, Texas responded to the hoax on Facebook to reassure their communities that there were no serial killers in those areas. Okay, but you don't know that, right? How would you know if there's really not a serial killer in your area? All you can confirm is no one's been killing pedophiles. There's always a serial killer somewhere, and not that far away. And both CBS 15 and NBC 9 News, not affiliated with either network, but whatever these websites are, both carry vague disclaimers buried on their privacy policy pages stating that the information contained on their website is for information and entertainment purposes only. Kind of bums you out though, man. I mean, it's almost a Batman-like story if there really was somebody out there. I guess Batman doesn't kill people, but a superhero story, somebody killing pedophiles. But it wasn't to be. On this next bit, this really interested me, so I thought I'd let you guys know about it. I'll do a little commercial for it. Are you tired of not being able to identify all the dead bodies you find lying around? We've all been there, on the way to work, walking through the park, or maybe just popping into your local grocery store to grab a loaf of bread. In a world of almost 8 billion people, you're bound to stumble across a few bodies out there. But how do you know who they are, where they came from, and who to contact for removal of said body? Well, ask no more. With Future Learn's easy online Identifying the Dead course, you'll be identifying those bodies in as little as 6 weeks. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Future Learn is an online school or academy. Academy sounds more fitting, I think. That offers courses in things like business and management, health and psychology, tech and coding, and teaching. You can take single classes or build a degree as you go through its various college partnerships. Sounds fairly straightforward, right? In the technological age that is now, we're accustomed to going to school online. The bulk of my degrees were earned online, but Future Learn, in addition to offering typical fare such as cybersecurity and nursing, has a few courses you probably won't find in many schools, such as Identifying the Dead, Forensic Science, and Human Identification. In 6 weeks, with 4 hours of study a week, free of charge, you can earn a certificate in identifying human remains. And this sounds really cool to me. The course description states, "The first step in any investigation involving a death is to determine the identity of the deceased. This free online course will take you on a journey through the world of forensic anthropology, unveiling the tools that will allow you to reveal that identity. In the shadow of Dundee's Law Hill, a grim discovery demands the attention of forensic experts. Unidentified human remains have been found, and the police need to identify the victim to move forward with their investigation. After a meticulous recovery of the remains, it will be your job to document and attempt to explain any evidence of trauma, identify the victim through biological profiling, and undertake a facial reconstruction. Experts from the University of Dundee's award-winning Center for Anatomy and Human Identification will guide you through the process of human identification. They will introduce you to the fields of human identification, forensic anthropology and archaeology, craniofacial identification, and the study of the human body. Week by week, the case will unfold, providing you with more information about the victim. You will be presented with theoretical material and hands-on learning opportunities to evaluate the case information and use what you have learned to piece together clues to the victim's identity. You will be able to discuss with educators and other learners your thoughts on the identity of the deceased based on your evaluation of the evidence. After you submit your evaluation of the victim's identity, all will be revealed at the end of the final week. You can continue your journey into the life and death of our victim in your very own ebook copy of a specially written murder mystery by international best-selling crime novelist Val McDermid. So that's kind of cool. After you finish the course, you can read a murder mystery about the victim you identified in class. By the end of the course, you'll be able to explore the principles of human identification, explore location, excavation, and examination of a clandestine burial, apply new knowledge to trauma analysis of a recovered body, contribute to the biological identification of a recovered body, produce a forensic facial reconstruction with the help of expert practitioners, debate the 3 primary identifiers, and summarize the events and processes from crime scene to courtroom. Warning, although this course involves the investigation of the death of a fictional character, some content may be distressing to individuals, particularly younger learners. However, this material is representative of that encountered by forensic experts. Who will you learn with? Helen Meadows, former postdoctoral researcher at the University of Dundee Center for Anatomy and Human Identification, with the course being designed by the university. And you can even track this online. There's a hashtag FLForensicID. That's FLForensicID that's used to discuss the course online. So I searched the hashtag on Twitter, and while nobody really gave a lot of detail about what was going on in the course, I did see a lot of people talking about how much fun it was. It looks like you learn how to identify bones, figuring out what the damage on the bones is, determining ethnicity, looking at trauma markings like the difference between blunt force trauma and sharp trauma, crime scene analysis. You even get to put together a composite of what they might have looked like. It looks like a ton of stuff going on in this course. It might be pretty cool for any true crime aficionados or people that just like a good murder mystery. Everyone posting about it makes it sound really fun. So I may have to go sign up for this just to check it out and report back to you guys with my findings. If anyone listening is taking this course, hit me up and let me know what you thought about it, and I'll report it to the other Deadites out there. That's my placeholder term for fans of this show. I guess I never said that. The Deadites. You're all Deadites. Write in and tell your fellow Deadites what this course is like if you've taken it before. Oh, and this is going a little longer than I thought it would. I was going to try to get to, I had an article about possible serial killer accomplices, and I was going to try to read you guys one of my letters from David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. I used to be pen pals with him, and I was going to try to squeeze a letter in on this show, but looks like we're going to run out of time. So yeah, I'm just going to jump straight ahead to the article, Last Words of Famous People. Just going down a list. I thought some of these were pretty cool. Elvis Aaron Presley said to his fiancée Ginger Alden, "I'm going to the bathroom to read." Frank Sinatra's last words were, "I'm losing it." Marie Antoinette last spoke as she stepped on the executioner's foot. "Pardonnez-moi, monsieur," which I assume means "pardon me, sir." Leonardo da Vinci, a man who achieved more than most of us could ever dream of, went out saying, "I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have." And if that's how he felt, how bad should the rest of us feel about our lives? Physicist, author, musician, professor, traveler, and apparently real-life fucking buckaroo bonsai Richard Feynman went out saying, "This dying is boring." That's kind of metal, man. If you're so dark and metal that you're going to go out saying even dying is boring. Churchill's last words, "I'm bored with it all." So far, that sounds the most like something I would say going, just dying. Like, this was boring anyway. Steve Jobs went out saying, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow," which sounds kind of like a Morty impression. "Oh wow, geez, oh man, oh wow." And those are the biggest names from that list I found. There was a list of about 46 people, but those were the big ones. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, everyone outside and in between, and you guys are my favorites, this has been episode 12 of No Better Death, 6 Murder Mix number 1. It did seem kind of mishmashy, hodgepodgey, not as cohesive as I thought maybe it would be. I feel like I did a lot of babbling in this episode. My bad. Thanks for tuning in again. As per usual, I make my weekly plea that you leave an iTunes review, if you would be so kind. I'm still giving away some DVD seasons for some random people that leave iTunes reviews between November 1st and December 5th. Leave a review. Your name goes into a drawing to win some pretty cool DVD seasons I'm getting rid of. Like I mentioned earlier, NoBetterDeath.info now has show notes and has been updated with links to all things No Better Death. We're on Facebook and Twitter. Pretty much everywhere, actually, but I really only use Facebook and Twitter and the Gmail. So if you have death stories, something you want me to cover on the show, updates about something we've covered that I never got back around to, or you just want to say hey to the fellow Deadites out there, email me or hit me up. I'll get it on the show. Another change to the format this week. I'm fucking everything up today. No theme, no outro music, none of that. I'm going to be playing a song by my friends Ben and Bonnie, perhaps better known as Revolution State. They're the most talented electronic musicians I know of. If you don't know who they are by name, you may still know a couple of their songs. If you're a fan of Velvet Astrochrist and you're familiar with the Hex Angel album, the songs Misery and Ava were actually written by Revolution State. So check your fucking liner notes. The song we're going to go out on today is called The Departed. I thought it was a fitting title for the show, and it's my favorite track of theirs off the album Viridian Resonance, which is available on iTunes. Again, that is Revolution State. Go check them out. Hail yourself for coming back here for this shit show week after week. I'm that guy from That Thing That Time, Sick Grayson. Next week's show will be back to better production. It won't be as spastic as I feel like this episode has been. Until next time, try not to die.